Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Spirituality and medicine. Never the twain shall meet. What's absent because of this divide? Is it possible to fully heal without addressing our spiritual well-being? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X-Zone TV channel, xztv.ca. With us this hour, to take a deeper look at the link between spirituality and medicine, is Michael Shea. Michael is the author of 8 books on the field of manual therapeutic arts. His latest book, The Biodynamic Heart, Somatic Compression Practices for a Clear and Vital Heart. He has advanced degrees in contemplative psychotherapy and somatic psychology. Michael is in training to become a Buddhist chaplain. He's also an international teacher focusing on the reflection of the human embryo and the human body for health, healing, and spirituality. Michael specializes in pediatric practice for severely disabled infants and children. He has 100% service-related PTSD disability with the Veterans Association. His website, sheaheart.com. Michael, thank you so much for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Well, the pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So, Dr. Shea, can you share the story of what first drew you to the healing arts?
Well, I suppose that gets into a little bit of my autobiography, because when I was in the military shortly after college, I was on a killing field. I was in a terrorist bombing attack. And as a result of that, when I got out of the service, I knew I had a problem. There was no such thing as PTSD in the 70s, no such thing. And I had to get as far away from the military as possible because it was the Vietnam era. And I got tired of having my uniform spit on. So I got involved, fortunately, because of my sister, in the alternative therapy field. It was just beginning. So I learned therapeutic massage, I learned diet, nutrition, naturopathy, and I realized that I couldn't go back to grad school right away, that I needed to have a profession. So I went to massage school and got my massage license. And that really started me in on the healing process, my own healing process of getting fixed, so to speak, or healed from that event. And it's still ongoing.
Well, Michael, thank you for your service. Those were tough times, for sure. So you've studied under both the Dalai Lama and Navajo medicine man. How did those experiences shape your path?
Well, I was raised Catholic, and so I went to a Jesuit university, and then I had to go through a phase of atheism. And that event that occurred in the military really brought me to an understanding that I needed to look deeper. I needed to have and take an inward turn. Events like that in the military, or even any trauma in life, can help one take an inward turn, and it certainly did me. And that inward turn got supported actually when I wanted to get advanced training in manual therapy, and I went to Boulder, Colorado, and I went to the Rolf Institute. And Boulder at the time, in the late 70s and early 80s, was a bastion of Buddhist work. And I learned Buddhist meditation. And the first time I sat down on a meditation cushion, I never turned back. It was like coming home for the first time in my life.
So what inspired you to pursue master's in Buddhist psychology and doctorate in somatic psychology?
Well, once again, exploring my own history of brokenness, but um, I really enjoyed manual therapy, and I unfortunately, because I had the energy in my 20s and early 30s, I could work a 7-day week, and I could travel to all sorts of cities and do body work, rolfing, and cranial work and so forth. And I pinched a nerve in my neck, and overnight, I lost complete function on the left side of my body, especially my left arm. And if you're a manual therapist, you're done. You're toast. So at the time, I just switched gears. I said, why don't I just take out a big student loan, go to Naropa University because I'd already converted to Buddhism, and get a degree in contemplative psychotherapy. And little did I know that that is the big thing right now, contemplative neuroscience. But in the process, I was in therapy 3 times a week for over 3.5 years, and it really, really helped ground me in terms of my own evolution as a human being.
So you were one of the first full instructors of cranial sacral therapy through the Upledger Institute, no less. How did that opportunity come about?
Well, this is great telling my story. Um, so, there's nothing worse than being a one-armed manual therapist. It doesn't work too well. But as I regained nerve function in the left arm, I still could not apply pressure. I took a class with John Upledger, his first ever, training in that domain. So what happened was that I realized that I could swing my other arm up on the table and I could hold people's heads and be very still. I could hold their sacrum, I could hold their feet, whatever the protocol called for, and I could work with the perceptual process that was necessary without applying pressure. So I got pretty good at cranial work out of necessity.
So, so how has your 4 decades in bodywork evolved alongside the growing field of integrative medicine?
Um, I feel like I've really been in lockstep with that. Although I will say that primarily manual therapy, obviously has been my interest. I also teach meditation and so forth, but I also integrate that into the classroom. But because of being able to go back and get a doctorate in my let me see, the mid 90s in somatic psychology, I got trained in how to be a lifelong learner and how to look at the literature, how to follow the literature, especially the literature on spirituality and health. When I did my doctorate, there were less than 100 research reports on spirituality and health. Now they're in the tens of thousands. But the point being that I have this vivid interest in lifelong learning, and I probably read 10 to 15 abstracts a week. People send them to me. You've got to read this. So I read it. I don't read the whole research report, but I can get it from there. So I've been able to stay updated on updates on the anatomy of the body, on metabolic problems with the body, which is really of primary interest in myself right now, and what's happening in the alternative field in general.
Which takes us to what is biodynamic craniosacral therapy?
Um, well, biodynamic craniosacral therapy comes fundamentally, it comes out of the osteopathic tradition. The founder of osteopathy, Andrew Taylor Still, was the first Western oriented medical person that attempted to bring spirit back into the equation of Western medicine and at the same time add a manual therapy component. His student, William Sutherland, had a big revelation probably around 1900 that he was looking at a skull that was disarticulated, and he said this must be able to breathe because of all these different articulations. So it was William Garner Sutherland, that actually started the cranial osteopathic tradition, osteopathy in the cranial field. And then it was John Upledger that then took that. He was an osteopath and he brought it to the non-osteopathic public. So that's how I ended up studying with John Upledger. So that's the typical lineage. And then at the end of Sutherland's life, and I think he was having a senior citizen moment because he was my age. I'm 76 right now, and he saw a force in the body, a light making a correction in the body, and he said, we've got to step back, and 1/1000th of a gram of pressure is all we need, and we need to be able to see the light and the breath of life in the body. And so that's the essence of the biodynamic model, is to really step back, hold the client in their wholeness, in their wellness, and be able to see how light the biophotons of the cell function and work, and His student, Dr. Jim Jealous, then brought in what is called biodynamic embryology. That's where that comes in for me, because I then was able to mentor with Dr. Jealous, a brilliant osteopath. He passed away several years ago, but he had a deep, deep interest in human embryology and how it related to health and healing. And so I became very interested in that, and very much have followed that path as well. Just looking at our origin of when we were originally whole as a single-celled human being. And here we are, this differentiated trillion-celled being, always looking for wholeness and sometimes without spirit.
So how does Buddhist philosophy influence your therapeutic approach?
Well, it turns out this can be very practical, or we could get very philosophical, and maybe we should avoid the philosophical component. But there's a big attention in Buddhism just on meditation practice and calming the mind. It's called calm abiding. So if I were to just say to the listener, the essence as I've learned it, within Buddhist practice is just being able to sit, to meditate, have a relationship with my mind, and know how to calm it down. So that's the essence of contemplative neuroscience as well. Well, it turns out that there's 8 categories of cells and tissues in the human body that require quiescence. It's called quiescent cells. They require dynamic stillness. So if the practitioner can be calm with their state of mind and not active, and also emotionally know how to settle, then that will actually create a very therapeutic effect, because cells work better in the human body when they're quiet, when the quiescent cells, when that category of cells can be quiet. So that's the way I link Buddhist practice to the metabolism of the body, the absolute necessity of every single Every single molecule in the body has to go through a still point in order to through its transformation and transmutation. Buddhist practice and contemplative practice, I'm not just singling out Buddhism, but there are many contemplative practices that allow that type of relationship that facilitates a deeper healing and perhaps a spiritual healing within the client.
Would you mind briefly explaining what a still point is?
Um, well, a still point, when we look at the therapy in general, this manual therapy of craniosacral therapy, um, when the perception of the tissues and the human body of the client, so I have my hands on someone and I can actually perceive when things quiet down. In other words, when their nervous system releases and relaxes around their stress level and something gets very, very quiet, the fluids of the body, which is a major part of this work, the cerebral spinal fluid and especially the blood and so forth. There's many types of fluids, but they're all related to water. We're 98% water. And so the waters calm down in the body and they go into a still point. And that's a threshold when this instinct for self-healing wakes up, bypasses the trauma, and that instinct for self-healing then sends the necessary vital force, whatever that might mean for an individual practitioner. That vital force then can revitalize the person at the level at which they've come, symptom-wise and otherwise. It's a possibility, doesn't always work.
Well, we're going to have to take a station break. Michael and I will return very shortly, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us this hour discussing the interface between medicine and spirituality is Michael Shea, the author of The Biodynamic Heart, Somatic Compression Practices for a Clear and Vital Heart. His website, sheaheart.com. Michael, you often speak of primary respiration and the long tide. Can you explain those concepts for us?
Basically, these are just simply metaphors for when we can perceive that something inside of us is slowing down. These terms were developed, and different osteopaths developed this terminology simply as a description of their own experience when they had their hands on a client and they felt that something was connected to the stillness, that once the stillness was perceived, that there was a slow movement in the direction of the fulcrum that was symptomatic, let's say, for the client. So that was very, very important for the understanding that something slow is moving. So it's called the long tide. It could be called primary respiration or simply the tide. But the practitioner learns to synchronize their attention with that slowness. So I have to come into relationship with that level of stillness and slowness in my body. And it's a universal perception. So the way I teach it is to be able to look at the horizon and perceive just slowness and movement of whatever it might be coming towards you, but also from the heart to heart with the client, that you can make this level of connection with the client and feel it as a slow movement, sometimes called qi in Taoism and acupuncture, or the vital force, it might be called. These are all metaphors for the same thing, the value of slowness and stillness.
Hmm. So, what role does compassion play in hands-on healing work?
That's a super that's a super question, Gwilda. So we have to understand that the basis of our compassion response, which is innate. So let's just put this out at the beginning. Compassion is innate. It's built within us. It's a responsiveness that we all have. We see somebody fall on the street, we hear a baby crying, whatever that is. Or if you're in the therapeutic business, a client comes in, they're suffering greatly, your heart goes out to them. So there is a responsiveness. But that responsiveness is based on the ability to recognize our own personal suffering. Everybody has their own unique style of suffering with their emotional upsets, their mental challenges that they face. And compassion really means that I am aware of and in touch with my own suffering, and therefore I can connect with other people because everybody has a basically same style of suffering. So that's the essence of compassion. But how do we build it? And the way we build it is, the research is so interesting. Just by feeling our heartbeat, Wilda, it's so amazing to consciously feel our heartbeat without taking our pulse, although you may need to take your pulse at the beginning, builds empathy. So the very foundation for evoking this type of responsiveness is the ability to feel our own heartbeat. And that heartbeat then allows us to give a direction to the responsiveness of compassion. And we call that right responsiveness because sometimes we have a response, excuse me, and it's not helpful. So, right responsiveness by waiting and listening for slowness and stillness. And then the moment emerges when we feel our heartbeat and we feel that connection and we know how to respond appropriately and compassionately.
Hmm. So, how do you see the body, mind, and spirit as interconnected in the healing process?
Um, it's so funny when you know the history of this. Well, it's always been connected. It's always there. It's the essence of who we are. It's only that somewhere around the Renaissance in this wonderful Western world of ours that we decided to split it off and give it to somebody else, like, the Catholic Church at the time, so that the medical community would no longer talk about spirit, but they would be able to dissect bodies and take care of the body. And we've seen that that's created a big challenge. But body, mind, and spirit, then we've been conditioned in a way in our culture to really split it off as though it was separate from our body. And it's not really. It depends on how the Abrahamic religions are going to want to define spirit in a particular way around the notion of God and Jesus and Allah, Muhammad, and so forth. But all of this is the essence of who we are, the essence of what lives in our heart. As they say in Taoism, the Shen, the spirit, the essence of spirit lives in our heart and is flowing through our blood. And so it's a very, very important notion, whether you believe it or not. But we've been conditioned away from finding that within ourselves. And that is the turn inward. That is the essence of contemplative neuroscience. In order to reconnect the spirit, which is already in us, we need to turn inward. It's already there.
So, how does your approach differ from more mechanical forms of craniosacral therapy?
Oh, I still do a mechanical work. The contemporary client is the sickest client that I've ever seen. I got into body work in the 70s, and gradually the client had relaxation issues, and then they had orthopedic issues in the 80s and 90s, and then they had big time nervous system issues, and then they had immune system issues. I'm telling you, we are a really, really a sick and challenged culture, and that's why these dynamics are so necessary. Um, Repeat that question again. I want to hone in on it a little bit more, Gwilda.
How does your approach differ from more mechanical forms of craniosacral therapy?
The so with the evolution of the contemporary client, then there's a necessity to develop a different skill set. One of my teachers said that I needed to learn three whole systems of therapy so that we could triangulate with the client at any given time if one thing wasn't working. Well, it turns out the mechanical work that I learned doesn't always work, and gradually it worked less and less. I still will use it periodically, but maybe only 10% of the time. But it's a tool. It's a necessary tool. If somebody's had a concussion, and I specialize in concussions, you need to be able to do some deep work and some mechanical work, disengaging, the bones of the cranium, let's say, for a specific instance like that. But with the contemporary client, they need a much softer, more gentle biodynamic approach that it can reach more deeply into the cells of their body and more deeply into the molecules within those cells and get them connected in a more universal manner.
So, you've written extensively on embryology. Why is understanding our earliest development important in healing?
Well, I've also studied anthropology and the anthropology of healing and medical anthropology, and I think this is a very important point, and that is that and you mentioned at the beginning I studied with a Navajo shaman for 10 years. These traditional systems of healing, in order for the healing to be effective, you need to create a ritual that symbolically regresses the patient back to the time of their embryo, because it's in the time of embryology, especially after conception, that we were a single celled whole human being. So the ritual is to take the human, to take this person, this client, that they can touch the living experience symbolically. It's not a regressive act per se. It's present right in our body right now. That level of undifferentiated wholeness, and to create a dynamic with stillness and slow movement, that they can actually touch that and they can actually feel that, and that healing then can come forward in their own instinctual process for self-healing and the instinct for self-transcendence in this moment. And it's beautiful the way this perceptual process works. So that's the the long and short of it with embryology. And then we find out that the human embryo in our body, it's incredible the way it develops. Psalm 139 says it wonderfully. We're wonderfully created, and it is. I'm full of awe every time I look at embryology. And I mentioned Jim Jellis at the beginning, and he taught me embryology. And I remember the first embryology book, I started looking at it and I started to cry. Why was I crying? This is me. This is me at a submicroscopic level, and it's a beautiful thing to observe, and to be able to touch that means that we can also heal. We can heal from the beginning forward.
So, what's the rule of artery is supreme and why is it significant?
Well, that gets us back to the founder of osteopathy, Andrew Taylor Still, and that's a beautiful question because Andrew Taylor Still, as I said, his fundamental principle is that we are a unit of mind, body, and spirit. So he brought spirit back in. It never really left. It just got dissected for the purpose of Western medicine and given away. But he also found out that as he was developing these different manual therapies, and his dislike for Western medicine at the time, which was actually pretty barbaric, and we don't need to get into that, just in terms of how healing happened, in Western medicine in the middle of the 1800s. But he realized that any place in the body that was stuck, with the muscles, with the bones, that there was also a restriction in blood flow. And that therefore, it's not just about relaxing the muscles. It's not just about freeing the bones, but we've got to free the blood. And so the blood became very, very important. The rule of the artery means free flowing with the proper stillness, which is actually in the middle of blood flow. Doppler radar studies have shown that there's a zone of stillness in the blood itself. So here we are back to the necessity of feeling the stillness. And although blood moves fast, there are also rhythms within the blood that go very slow. And this is because the contemporary client, the lining of the blood, and here's kind of the punchline of the rule of the artery, the lining of the blood vessels is called the endothelium, and it's a quiescent cell state. We live in a world now where 95% of us have metabolic problems, and that means inflammation. And that means automatically inflammation in the endothelial structures of the entire or almost the entire cardiovascular system. When the endothelium changes from quiescent, from being a still cell, to an inflamed superactive cell, then the blood starts to flow improperly. And we have all of these heart problems now. 93% of Americans have metabolically unhealthy hearts. And it has to do with the blood, the way the blood is built, and the way the endothelium is damaged because of inflammatory processes from the food we eat and the disruption of our metabolism at the level of the intestines.
So, how can craniosacral therapy support the immune system?
Well, God, you were asking really good questions. I love this. So we actually now we're in the age of the immune system. I'm calling it the age of the immune system. So for the past 10 years, and then with the advent of COVID, and vaccines and all of that, the medical doctors that I follow, they're mainly Europeans, and we teach at a alternative cancer clinic in Switzerland.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt and we'll pick up on the other side. It is time for a station break. Michael and I will be right back to continue our discussion, so you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org, with us discussing biodynamic craniosacral therapy is Michael Shea. His website, sheaheart.com. Michael, we were talking about how craniosacral therapy can impact the immune system. Would you continue, please?
Yes, for sure. But just historically now, and it's recent events, we could say. So we are in the age of the immune system. One of the reasons people are so sick is the disruption, not only of the endothelium, but the lining of the intestines is where the interface between the acquired immune system and the innate immune system are located, the molecular signaling. So the disruption of the intestinal lining, the epithelial lining, then results in the disruption of the endothelium of the blood vessels and the spreading of inflammation and the spreading of disease process, metabolic syndromes. Depending on your epigenetics, depending on your family lineage, you'll likely end up with that lineage dynamic. But the immune system, what we're finding out and what the docs are saying that we study with in Europe, that this immune system was already stressed. It was already stressed to the max. So COVID, and vaccines and so forth just took the immune system and overflowed the barrel of the immune system. Now, what does that mean? It means that the immune system is oriented around trying to kill and get rid of the cells and the viruses and all that stuff we hear about that's not helping our body. And when we have that level of inflammation, the immune system can't work. And I'm sorry to use this analogy, but because we used to have a septic tank in the back, but the septic tank starts to overflow. And basically you see these levels of obesity, you see people's bodies just starting to expand because their detoxification channels are blocked, and they can't get the toxicity from the cells because cells have toxins that they're trying to get rid of when they're producing energy for us to be doing what we're doing right here, Gwilda. And but we also have to have channels open to detoxify and get rid of these waste products. When that doesn't happen, and it's not happening in most people, then the immune system basically shuts down because it's overloaded, it can't work, and we live in this age of a very, very compromised immune system and a very compromised cardiovascular system. So the immune system can't get rid of the pollutants that it needs to. That's the simple answer right there.
Hmm. So, how do you integrate Western anatomy and physiology with Buddhist practices?
Well, form is function. So, you know, in Buddhist practice, it's really helpful because I mentioned it at the beginning. Buddhist practice, if we just take the essence and we don't get into a lot of philosophy, meditation is it. Meditation, calming down, being able to sit and contemplate. And sitting meditation or Buddhist meditation might not be everybody's cup of tea. I understand that, and that's why there's many contemplative practices. But you asked me about Buddhism. So, and meditation practice then requires uh, a posture, and it's like a yoga posture. It's a sitting posture, and it has 7 points to it. And so what's happening now is if your anatomy and your physiology is disrupted, which it is in so many people, when I teach a meditation class now, I have to spend half the class. Well, if you can't sit this way, you're going to have to sit another way. And if you're orthopedically challenged, you're going to have to do this. 20% of meditators or first time meditators, this is stunning. This is very important research. 20% of meditators that try it for the first time have a negative reaction. What does that mean? It means they get into tachycardia. It means they get into a disruptive state within their nervous system, which is completely the opposite of what's supposed to be happening with meditation. So then it's how do we manage that? How do we manage? I tell people, get up, leave, walk. Buddha said you could do walking meditation. Buddha said you could do seated meditation. Buddha said you could meditate while you're lying down. So choose the dimension that is most comfortable for you because anatomy and physiology are very, very important. And pain, physical pain, does not help the process of meditation, of calming your mind down because you're so focused on the pain. So that's why anatomy and physiology is so vitally important.
So, in your experience, how does meditation enhance the work you do with clients?
Well, Gwilda, if I can get my crazy mind and my crazy emotions out of the way before I sit down with the client, because this is what all my teachers said, you got to place your ego outside the room. That's the teaching that is given. But basically, I need to be able to calm down, and if I want to give my best to the client. So even for example, with this process that we're doing right now, before we began, I sat down and did a 15-minute meditation. Before a client comes in, I start to ratchet down. I turn off social media. I turn off all of that. I start, getting a feel for who I am within my skin and what's going on in the natural world. And then I start using meditation techniques because ultimately I cannot heal the client. The client has to heal themselves. I have to be able to sit with a clear intention of being compassionate, but not helpful in the way of getting in the way of their instinct for self healing. I have to completely get out of the way. So Buddhist meditation has really helped me in that domain of just settling, stilling, getting in my own compassionate response, and creating a clear intention that the client wake up their own potential for healing.
So, how can biodynamic work help address trauma, both physical and emotional?
Um, well, all God's children have trauma. I remember listening to a lecture a couple of years ago by Robert Thurman, who's a professor emeritus at Columbia, a real funny guy, and he's a Buddhist teacher as well. And the first thing he said, and it made perfect sense to me, we are the trauma species. We are the trauma species. We have to understand that also from an instinctual point of view. As a human embryo, we don't specialize. We don't have a specialized skill at the embryonic period like all other mammals do. We're kind of an open-ended dynamic. And usually mammals are going to have a specialization for how they're going to kill and get their food at the end of the embryonic period. But we kind of make this up as we go along throughout, our entire life. And so trauma seems to be part of that dynamic. So when a person comes to me, certainly I'm going to want to know the history because I've got my own trauma from the military and so forth. And I've been trained now to make sure that I don't get activated. And if I do get activated by listening to the client's story, I have the skill of setting that aside because I've got a therapist. I'll deal with that later. But right now it's all about the client. So the biodynamic work is trying to bring down the autonomic nervous system tone. Now, the autonomic nervous system is the system in the body that makes our heart beat, that helps digest food and all of that. So it's a very important system and it registers trauma first. So that system of the body you can see by blood color changes in the client's skin, any tremoring that they might make, blinking of their eyes, breathing patterns, all the ways in which the therapist knows that the client is going through an activation of their autonomic system. And if we're gentle enough with the biodynamic work, that activation will then change into a dissipation. We are built to dissipate trauma. And like I said with the immune system, we're kind of plugged up. And so we're also plugged up at the level of the autonomic nervous system because it knows how to switch gears and it knows how to take the trauma and to dissipate it throughout the rest of the body and to settle. So this is what biodynamic work really does quite well, is to notice that switching and to set it up so that that self-healing instinct can be activated more fully at the level of the nervous system.
So, are there measurable physiological changes you've observed during and after a session? You were speaking of some of them. So,
Um, they're observable. I've tried to track a lot of the literature on craniosacral therapy in general, and I haven't been able to look at it or anything that's current in the last 10 years.
mhm.
I am familiar with how the um, there is some literature that, and it's within the osteopathic community, where they've been able to measure. You can measure the tone of the autonomic nervous system, and you can measure that tone decreasing. So I would say yes, there are measurements that can be made from a research point of view, but I have to rely as a client, as a therapist with the client at the end of the session. I have to find out from them how they're feeling, but I don't want to bring them into a cognitive place right away because they've gotten into their body. So I can observe stillness, quiet. I can observe through the tone of their voice and what they're reporting in terms of their own experience, the value of what just happened or not, because we also have to be trained in side effects. What happens if the client sits up and says, I'm not feeling so well? I have a headache or I have this. So we have to be trained on how to, let's get the client back down and help them stabilize because maybe we finished prematurely. That doesn't happen to me a lot anymore, but it happened originally at the beginning, and it does happen to clients. So when I teach, I have to teach how to treat side effects. So there's no easy answer to that. There is some literature, but you have to use your own eyes and your own sensibility, and you have to rely on what the client is saying to you and what they're reporting, especially between sessions. So phone's on. If you're having a problem tomorrow or the next day, let me know.
So you've trained practitioners around the world. What qualities do you look for in a great craniosacral therapist?
Wow, a great craniosacral therapist. I got to tell you, we live in the day and age of you got to have a license and you got to be certified and you got to be all of that. And I worked in the field of pediatrics and I was able to teach parents how to feel what I was feeling in order to treat their own children. And I've wanted to set up in various churches around the state of Florida because I have um, nieces that are connected with these churches, ministries of laying on of hands. I believe everyone is qualified to use their hands to heal other people, especially with stillness and silence. How simple can that be? So, um, ask me that question again. I got carried away with my nieces in church.
That's okay. I was asking, what do you look for in an instructor? What do you look for in a student to be a good craniosacral therapist?
Well, Gwilda, as I said, I'm willing to train anyone, and I can't do that within the format that I have right now. Now, my format is that I used to do foundation training programs that were 700 hours, and I've set up a number of schools in Europe
Well, I'm
and in
sorry.
North America.
We're going to have to pick up on this on the other side of a station break. Please stay with us as Michael and I continue to explore bridging spirit and medicine. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Michael Shea, his website, sheaheart.com. Michael, how do you keep traditional healing wisdom alive while adapting to modern needs?
How do I keep? I was going to answer the other question, so uh, ask me that again. I was already in the previous question. I'm sorry. I feel like a village idiot here.
How do you keep traditional healing wisdom alive while adapting to modern needs?
Oh, oh, I turned my TV off a long time ago. I don't watch TV. Um, so, I mean, I've got a TV over there, but no, I haven't turned the TV on a long time. I have to say, fortunately, that what the military happened in my 20s is I didn't have TV and I got out of the habit of watching TV. So I never owned a TV. Now I own a TV just in case, but I don't watch it. I don't follow any particular social media in particular, although I have social media accounts, but I don't, do that scrolling and obsessive amounts of time looking at any of that. So the way I make that bridge with this tradition is I make sure that I practice what I preach, and that is the value of turning inward, the value of contemplative practice. If I have spare time, I'm going to be doing meditation. If I have spare time, I'm going to be doing work with other people. I do a lot of supervision work. So I don't really have time for TV and that kind of thing. And so I do a lot of supervision. I supervise therapists and clients all over the world. And that's really what my heart's, desire is. So that's the way I bring it forward. But I have to do my own practice. I do my own practice, my own contemplative practice. I still have teachers, Buddhist teachers, and other teachers, contemplative teachers, that I take weekly seminars with so that I'm always feeling like I can stay grounded in my spiritual practice because the world keeps changing and I need to change with it. And I need to be Michael as we go along. Not the same Michael, but I have to be Michael and evolve Michael as much as possible.
So, could you talk about your work with pre and perinatal psychology?
Well, I was asked to teach embryology at the Santa Barbara Graduate Institute. So I taught the basic embryology program in the pre and perinatal doctoral programs out there. So embryology, of course, is going to be related uh, in terms of pre and perinatal psychology. I don't know much about that field because I'm an embryologist and not a pre and perinatal psychologist. But what I can tell you, because you mentioned it at the beginning, is that I've got a lot of practical experience of over 40 years of working with infants and children who have developmental challenge. And that means moderate to very severe brain damage from birth or from during the pregnancy or metabolically, or even trauma or attachment issues. I became an expert in attachment issues as I got to know the whole field of embryology that included fetal development, that included the birth process. So I work with a lot of midwives. I do a lot of consult with some midwives around that period of time. I'm a specialist in helping people and therapists in neonatal intensive care units and how to manage their perceptual process. I teach meditation practices for parents who have children in these NICU units, which is really amazing. And I have to say, back to that question on compassion, is that these are the children that taught me compassion. When you come out of the military with the level of damage that I had, and it's getting involved with these children, I'm getting chills up and down my body right now. It's these children that taught me compassion. When you see a child like this and they don't know they're damaged, or whatever that might mean, they don't know they're challenged. They're just communicating one on one, a human being to another human being. It almost brings a tear to my eye right now that these children, and this is pre and perinatal psychology, these children are fully conscious, wanting to communicate. And these children are here because they want to teach us compassion. This is what I learned. They're not damaged. They're here to teach us compassion.
Mm. So, how has teaching shaped your own understanding of this work?
Teaching in general,
Teaching
well,
the work, I would think.
it's interesting because I always wanted to be a teacher. I think it was my high school English teacher that inspired me. And then I minored in education in undergraduate school. So I knew I wanted to be a teacher. And, um, and then as an officer in the military, you have to teach certain things, which we won't go into right now. So I always had kind of had the teacher thing in me. Um, and so as part of my doctoral program, I also did a lot of study on adult learning and development. So I wrote a manual on adult learning and development and how to be with the contemporary learner, the contemporary adult learner. I taught high school English when I got out of college. And let me tell you, 1 year of working with adolescents, I was out of there. You'll never see me in this school system again. Oh my God. But I like working with adults and I like the adult classroom. And the adults have certain challenges that they do face. And so I feel really good on that. And I stay up with that, especially with the educational models necessary in what's called trauma informed care or trauma informed teaching. So, really being able to relate to students in a wonderful way, whether or not it's time for them to heal their trauma, because they're usually just coming so that they can learn to put their hands on their clients and learn something to help themselves better as well as the client. But I love teacher. I'm a born teacher.
So, what are some common misconceptions student or the public have about craniosacral therapy?
Um, I suppose there's a lot of different um, misconceptions. Some of the misconceptions have to do with it's painful, um, or that I'm not able to direct the experience. And again, that's trauma informed care, to let the client know that they have absolute control of the session whenever there's any discomfort. So those misconceptions are pretty standard, that there's pain, or that I'll be emotionally upset, or that I'm dealing with too many side effects, or this healer, this therapist doesn't have a good reputation because I had this side effect and it lasted for a week. There's a lot of it happens because it's natural. There's a lot of doctor shopping. In my world, it became clear to me because I was doing 40 and 50 sessions a week. I couldn't fix everybody. And maybe some people could throw their crutches away at the end of a session, but I couldn't make that the goal because most people weren't. And I say that metaphorically. They go on to see the next person that will help them, that can match and synchronize their own needs, body, mind, and spirit. And I can't match everyone's needs, and nobody else can either. So the contemporary client has to be given permission to move on to find the person they need.
So, for someone curious but unfamiliar, how would you recommend they start exploring craniosacral therapy?
I think the best thing to do is because, well, here in the United States, we have the spa industry. So I've watched the whole massage industry more since I got into it at the beginning, and so I'm very familiar with the industry, and it's become a spa industry, and that's okay. And that means my recommendation for anybody is if you have never received manual therapy, please receive a spa massage first. Please go to a valid, recognized, licensed massage establishment or spa that does legitimate massage. Get yourself a minimum 60 to 90-minute. It's got to be, I would recommend a minimum 60-minute massage and just see how your body responds to a massage. Because if you've not received anything, don't jump into cranial work. Um, it's very light touch. It's done with your clothes on, and it's just different. And the massage will help you acclimate to lying on the table, to having hands put on you, and to have a dialogue with the client around your health and well-being.
So, what role does self awareness play in maintaining health and well being?
The role of self-awareness, again, is related to the spiritual path. All spiritual paths. Uh, I can't say all. So I've done a major study of Eastern traditions, and so I'm really interested in the what's called the spiritual path and the way the spiritual path unfolds, and it unfolds in a step-by-step process. I am certified as a yoga instructor. I don't teach that anymore, but in the Yoga Sutras, the eight Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, there's an eightfold spiritual path. In Hinduism, and then in Taoism and acupuncture, there's a ninefold spiritual path. So it all involves self-awareness, the gradual turning inward, the gradual ability to have a focal attention on breath, body sensation, and heartbeat, and open awareness. So self awareness means stillness and silence. How much do you put a value on that once you've settled your body and your mind? So self awareness is linked to stillness and silence, and making that accessible and getting a relationship with your mind so that when your mind is chaotic, you can recognize that and settle into a open, self-aware place. That's the key.
So, how do you see the future of biodynamic craniosacral therapy evolving?
Um, we are supposed to evolve as human beings, and our teachers, my teachers, and especially Andrew Taylor Still and this whole lineage of osteopaths, they all say the same thing: dig deeper, evolve this work. And the reason the work needs to evolve, Gwilda, is that the contemporary client is constantly evolving themselves, as I've mentioned throughout this interview. And that means, I hate to say this, they're getting worse. Many people are getting worse. Some people are getting better. But in order to understand, you have to understand metabolism now of the human body. Anatomy and physiology is not enough. So the body and its molecules are related to spirituality and cosmology. And this is what the Eastern traditions are saying. So the contemporary therapist needs to have better tools, better self awareness to evolve their touch, to evolve their perceptual process, and to be able to synchronize with the client as they evolve in the contemporary illnesses that are facing our civilization. We are
Well,
have civilization. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, but we're out of time. It's just been wonderful working with you. Michael, thank you so much for coming on the show. Our guest this hour has been Michael Shea. Michael is the author of 8 books in the field of manual therapeutic arts. His latest book, The Biodynamic Heart, Somatic Compression Practices for a Clear and Vital Heart. To find out more about Michael, where you can find his books and all he has to offer, visit his website, sheaheart.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us again right here on the X Zone TV channel, xztv.ca, where this mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to our evolving world.